Hi, this is Andy from heatdumping.com. Today we're going to discuss how heat dumping works. But in order to do that, I'm going to tell you two different stories. So here's the first story. So here's someone working out, and we're going to zoom into one of his muscle cells. Now, all cells need to create energy on their own in order to work. So within each cell, there are little factories. This first factory is called GlycoLab. And here's a worker. His name is Pete Klein, but everyone calls him PK. PK has a special job because he's the closer. He takes all the work that the factory has done, and in the last step, he makes a special product called pyruvate, along with some energy. So then this pyruvate is taken over next door to the factory called Krebs Corp, and they use it to make even more energy. And this energy is what the muscle cell uses to do work. But as muscles work, they produce heat. And when it gets too hot in there, PK decides, kind of like the rest of us would, to stop working. So no PK, no pyruvate. No pyruvate, no energy. No energy, and the muscle can't work anymore. There's nothing wrong with the muscle, it's just run out of gas. Like if your car ran out of gas, you can push on the gas pedal as much as you want, but the car's not going to go anywhere. So what happens next is that the heat gets dissipated throughout the body and the bloodstream, and the temperature in the muscle starts to cool down during the rest break. And that's when PK can start working again, and the person's able to do more exercises. Now, as a side note, there's a rumor going around that some of his coworkers think that PK is lazy and not committed to his job. But if he didn't stop working when it got too hot, and that meant that the factories kept making energy, the muscles would keep working and producing heat, the next thing you know, the whole place would be up in flames. So PK is actually being pretty helpful whether he knows it or not. So what happens to the heat? As it spreads around the body, it starts to build up, while it's also slowly being radiated out. Just like you can open doors and windows to let heat out of a hot house, the body has special places to radiate heat out from the inside of the body. And one of these windows, probably the biggest one, is the palm of your hands. See, they have these special blood vessel superhighways. Let's call this one Highway AVA. Usually, blood goes through arteries to capillaries to veins, which is kind of like taking the off-ramp off the superhighway and going through tiny little side streets. But this superhighway skips all that, and there's a lot of heat in the blood that passes through this area in the palm. So there's a lot of heat running through the bloodstream that's traveling through that spot. Okay, so at this point, let's pause that story for a second and get to the second story. So for the second story, imagine a room, and inside the room, there's a radiator. The guy who lives in the room loves his radiator, and he wants to make sure that it runs as long as possible. So he makes sure he runs it every day. The radiator shuts off automatically when it gets too hot. So what the man does is he'll run it until it shuts off, then wait 2 minutes, run it again until it shuts off, wait another 2 minutes, and keep doing that until he's run it 5 times. And he does that every day. So the first time he runs it, the radiator goes on, starts heating up, and that starts to heat up the room. And when it gets too hot, the radiator will automatically shut off. But the room has now gotten a little bit warmer. The man waits 2 minutes, then runs the radiator again. But this time, since the room has already started out a little bit warmer, the radiator doesn't have to run as long until it shuts off. And heat continues to build up more and more in the room. And each time he runs the radiator, the temperature in the room increases. And the next time he runs the radiator, it takes less time before it shuts off automatically. This is what happens when we work out. Our muscle is the radiator that makes heat, and the room is the inside of our bodies. If we do multiple sets of exercises, we typically do less and less as we go along. And most people think that's because our muscles are getting weaker somehow, but it's actually just because the insides of our bodies are getting hotter, and our muscles are forced to rest quicker. The good news is that this room is attached to another room, connected by a door. So if the man opens the door and lets the heat get shared by both rooms, he'll be able to run his radiator a bit longer. But at a certain point, he runs into the same problem when both rooms get too hot. But wait, there's an air conditioning unit in the room next door. If we run the air conditioner, it'd stay cooler in the room, and the man could run his radiator longer, which is what he's trying to do. The only thing is that the man doesn't like it too cold, and he'll shut the door if the temperature in the next room gets below 50 degrees. So ideally, if the man wants to run his radiator for as long as possible, he'll turn on the AC next door, set it to about 50 to 55 degrees to make his room as cool as possible so that his radiator will continue to run without turning it down so low that he'll shut the door. And that's heat dumping. So basically, your muscles produce heat when they work, and they're limited by temperature. Heat gets dispersed around the body, and the amount of heat that builds up internally limits the amount of work that you can do with repeated sets of activity. You can disperse heat best through the palms of your hands, like having an open door to disperse heat out of a room. But the temperature of the cooling device needs to be continually as cold as possible without making it so cold that you shut the door. And that is heat dumping.